Hello and welcome back to another video tutorial here at GeekatPlay Studios. My name is Gary Miller. I've got a fun little tutorial on creating depth of field in your renders. We're not going to create the depth of field in view. We're going to set up and render our image in view and do our depth of field blurring in Photoshop CS3. I've created a very basic scene. I've got three spheres all at varying distance from one another. The first one is here. You can't see it. It's very small. That's the green one. And then at a good distance away from it, got the blue. And we've got the red one furthest in the background. Do a quick little render, and this is our image. What I want to do, though, is the green sphere that is closest to the camera. I want that to be nice and crisp. This blue one, which is further away, I want it to be a little more blurred, and this red one I want to be very blurred. But if you've ever worked with blurring and creating depth of field in view, then you know very well that it takes an inordinate amount of time for view to create that effect. It does a good job, certainly, of creating that depth of field blur, but it takes a long time. So we're going to set out to create the same look in a much quicker rate. So here is my render. I want to come up here and click on my little mini disk icon, and I want to save that to my desktop. I've already done it, so I'm not going to do it now. And then I also want to save my Z depth render, which you can view by clicking this Z icon. And how this works is objects that are closest to the camera, view renders the darkest. As objects retreat away from the camera, further from the camera's eye, they become lighter in color until they're rendered, completely white. So an object's distance in relation to the camera is rendered in different shades of black or gray. And I want to save this image also, which I've already done, so I won't do it again. So with both the color and the Z depth images saved to my desktop, I'm going to open up Photoshop, and here's my color image and here's my Z depth image. First thing I want to do is I'm going to grab my Z depth image. I'm going to click on channels here, and I want to hold down my control or command if you're working on a Mac and hit my A button. I want to come up here to edit, and I want to copy that. I don't need that anymore. Now in my color render, I want to click on my channels tab. I want to come down here and create a new layer, and it's going to name it Alpha 1, which is fine. Come over here to edit, and I want to paste that black and white Z depth image that I had just created. Now I want to hold down Control D. I want to deselect this. I don't need to have it highlighted anymore. I'm going to click on my RGB tab to re-enable that. I'm going to click off my Alpha tab because I don't want to see that. Come back over here to Layers, create a duplicate of that. I'm going to come up here to Filter and select Blur and come down here to Lens Blur. And unfortunately, in this particular window, I have no control over resizing it. I can only move it around. So I'm going to have to move this around a bit. Now the way this tool works is my crosshairs, wherever I click with my crosshairs, that will be the focus point of this particular filter. So if I click on my blue one, my blue sphere, now the blue one is rendered crisp and sharp, and the other spheres become blurred. Well, I want the green one to be sharp and the main center of my focus, so I'm going to click on the green one, and it blurs everything else now nicely. Now, if your system hasn't already done this, it's going to ask for a depth map, which is what our Z depth map was. And I don't know what yours is going to display here, but we want to click on that layer that we created, and it was called Alpha 1. That's the source that it's going to use to create your depth of field. And where you click is where the focus point is. The radius curve here, the radius setting, determines the amount of blur that's applied to the entire effect. So if I reduce my blur, I know you can't see it, there's very little blurring applied, or if I increase it all the way to 100, then a much greater amount is applied. I'm going to keep it at about 70. And that's good. I particularly like the shape triangle 3. All the other ones I don't care for the way it represents the blurring. I'll click on octagon 8 and you'll see, watch the edge here. The edges become very sharp and noticeable, and there's more. It's more like a halo effect around the thing, around the sphere, rather than the edges being blurred. So I like the triangle effect, at least for this particular application that I'm using. And with that, I'm happy with that. I'm going to hit OK. And all right, Photoshop has done its work. There is one small drawback to this tool, and that is, I'm going to grab my pin tool here. If you notice the edges, they're still very visible. They're still very sharp and clear. I want them to be a little more blurred, so I'm going to come down here and grab my blur tool, and I'm using a tablet. So, but you can do this just as easy with a mouse, and I'm just going to blur the edges just like that. Now I know from experience, if I were to be doing this in view, I would still be waiting for it to render. It takes that long for it to add a depth of field blur to the images. So that's a very quick way to create a depth of field blur, not in view, but in Photoshop, and it's very convincing. There is one shortcoming though to this tool, and that is with reflections. Now this is the same image, except that the floor surface has a reflective setting on it. And I'll show you where this tool falls short. So I'm going to come over here to channels in my color window, create a new channel, alpha 1. Since the Z image is already in memory, I'm just going to paste it in there, and that's what we want. Re-enable my color, turn off my alpha, Control D to deselect that, come back up to my layers tab, create a new layer. Now we already ran the filter, it already has the previous settings. I'm just going to run the filter again, and you'll see where Photoshop doesn't do its job entirely perfect, and that is right here. The spheres have the same level of blur applied to them, but unfortunately here on the reflective surface they don't match the same appearance as the sphere itself. So that's sort of a shortcoming with this tool. Now if you are using it to add a depth of field blur to a landscape, anything like that that doesn't involve this sort of a reflective surface, trust me, it works perfectly. But this is one little area that this tool could somehow use some improvement on. So that's all I got for you today on adding depth of field blur, and not in doing it in View, but in doing it in Photoshop CS3. And I learned uh, this trick from Chip Walters off of his website altuit.com. So I really appreciate Chip creating a written tutorial showing me how to do it, so I can create a video tutorial for you guys to learn from. So thanks for watching here at GeekatPlay Studios. My name is Gary Miller. Have a good day.